So it's been a year since I last uploaded a video on this channel, and during that time, a lot of things have changed, a lot of things have happened, and 2020 hasn't been the best year for all of us. Let's just all agree on that. But that got me thinking, what can I do to make things better? Should I make a video about the importance of wearing a mask? Or should I make a video about the importance of social distancing? All this good, informative stuff. And then it hit me. It dawned on me. I should talk about wrestling. Yeah. And during the pandemic, pro wrestling has had to improvise a lot of things. From the introduction of cinematic matches, such as the Boneyard match or the Fight or Flight Funhouse match, which were great, by the way, to the transition to the empty arena shows. It's been wild. But in the midst of all that, one company, other than WWE of course, has taken my interest and kept me on the edge of my seat every single week. But who could it be? Is it the newly re-energized Impact Wrestling? Or could it be the newly formed, well, relatively new NWA Power? Or maybe it's MLW, or maybe it's a promotion from Japan. The possibilities are endless. Who could it be? Who could it be? Who could it? It's AEW. It's AEW. It's pretty obvious, isn't it? Yeah. So before we get started, I'm not gonna compare AEW to every single wrestling promotion on the face of the earth, because I don't have the energy or time to do that. But I am, however, going to compare it to the company that has been the face of pro wrestling in North America, WWE. Now, most people would compare AEW with NXT, WWE's least popular brand. Well, no, actually, it's NXT UK, but whatever. But here I'm gonna compare AEW with Raw and SmackDown, two of WWE's flagship programs, because I don't know, I just feel like it. The situation for both companies before and during the pandemic are night and day. While AEW was still trying to introduce their wrestlers, WWE was already more popular, with household names like Brock Lesnar, The Fiend, Goldberg, the returning Edge, Drew McIntyre, Charlotte, etc. WWE still had some recurring problems though, like 50-50 booking, micromanaged promos, and formulaic episodes of Raw and SmackDown, where every episode had to start with a promo. Before the pandemic, WWE won the overall war, quote unquote, just because of sheer superstar power. The product might still be the stalest it's been for quite some time, but no other promotions in North America can touch WWE. That being said, AEW wasn't bad at all. I enjoyed Dynamite whenever I could watch it, but at this point I was still a WWE fan, so I didn't really pay attention to Cody and Co. They had some really bright young stars with unlimited potential, like Sammy Guevara, MJF, and Orange Cassidy. More on him later. Their booking was mostly good. Maybe not in the women's division, because they don't really have a lot of women's wrestlers. Either that or they get injured, so, regardless, they were on the rise. After the pandemic reached the USA, a lot of events that have audiences got cancelled. This included wrestling shows. So WWE and AEW had to run empty arena shows due to contractual obligations from their respective networks. WWE started the empty arena with a bang. WrestleMania was awesome, and Money in the Bank was fun. The Raw and SmackDown episodes weren't, that bad either. Meanwhile, AEW was still struggling with star power because a lot of their wrestlers decided to stay at home, which is a very wise thing to do, or some wrestlers are just not able to come to shooting, like the bastard Pac. The result of all this meant there were a lot of matches with jobbers in them, but this is where AEW got me. they treat their jobbers with respect. They allow jobbers to show off some moves most of the time. They have names, they have gimmicks, they have characters. They're not just some random white meat. Whereas in WWE, they just let the jobbers be, white meat for the sharks. That made me feel like anything could happen. And as time progressed, news came out that WWE hasn't implemented safety measures regarding to the virus. They haven't checked the wrestlers and the staff properly. They didn't really do any safe distancing, and news also came out saying that Vince and Kevin Dunn didn't allow anyone to wear masks while taping. After the news got viral, WWE was forced to test their wrestlers properly. And boy, did a lot of wrestlers got infected. I mean, at first you couldn't really tell because the shows were pre-taped and you felt like everyone's there, But then after a couple of weeks, the shows just kept using the same wrestlers over and over and over and over again. Which is funny because WWE has a ton of wrestlers that are under contract with them, like hundreds. And this is where WWE lost me. It became so boring. And although my favorites were still there, like Drew, like Aleister, and, Rey Mysterio, I just can't stay to watch 3 hours of the same guys wrestling over and over and over again. And after, Edge suffered an injury, that was it. I lost all my interest. AEW, on the other hand, implemented safety measures. They tested the wrestlers properly, and that created a safer workplace. That meant, as the infection rate died down slowly, a lot of their more popular wrestlers could come back and perform. And at this point, I could feel that AEW is beating WWE quality-wise. I didn't even watch the highlights for Raw or SmackDown anymore, because I knew it was just going to be the same fucking thing from last week. Meanwhile, in the AEW, things are cooking up. They have interesting and new storylines. The promos feel natural, and the skits they do are pretty entertaining. Now let's analyze AEW's strengths. First, storylines. At the beginning of their tenure, AEW had some bad storylines, like the Nightmare Collective. But I think now they've learned from their mistakes. The transitions between storylines for wrestlers make sense now. And if 2 wrestlers are facing each other without any storylines, they could just say that they are competitors. And it would make sense because in AEW they have this win-loss system, unlike the WWE. And yes, I know the win-loss system is flawed, but it just makes everything much better, the storytelling, and it's just more fun. And not everything has to be an angle, Wrestlers could just face each other because it's their fucking jobs, Vince. Second, the promos. The promos are also really refreshing to hear. It's not micromanaged. They don't sound robotic. They sound human, like 2 people talking to each other. They can pretty much say whatever they want. They don't have to abide by Vince's weird list. And it's really good to hear Matt Hardy or Brody Lee, Mr. Brody Lee, portray their personas with their own input and without any proverbial leash. And no offense to Baron Corbin, for example, since he's probably a really nice guy in real life, but the things WWE give him to work with are absolute trash. His promos and usually matches send me to sleep. Meanwhile in AEW, I get hooked by almost every promo. And yeah, that's all good. But the most important thing in wrestling are the matches. So how are the matches in AEW? Well, for me, it's like a new experience. Yes, they still spam Canadian destroyers and other wrestling cliches pretty frequently, but can you blame them? 2 of their EVPs have a gimmick of spamming super kicks. But regardless, I still really enjoy the matches there because it has that subtle amount of unpredictability. The matches don't always end with a finisher, and this happens pretty regularly on AEW Dark, which makes it even more interesting. And yes, I watch Dark, and I sometimes think the matches on Dark are better than some matches on Raw or SmackDown. But I do, however, don't really like some spots they do in some matches. Like, for example, that Canadian Destroyer spot they had during the Jurassic Express versus Elite match. It looked too choreographed and doesn't really look like they're fighting, but that's just me. And finally, the last point I want to cover is the wrestlers themselves. I think AEW, for the most part, know who is over and who is not, even though it's hard to tell without the crowd being present. The rising star right now is Orange Cassidy. They've booked him really well until this point. They haven't shoved him down our throats, nor have they buried him either. And he's a top merch seller because of it. And now he's feuding with Chris Jericho, and judging by their match on Fyter Fest, I have no doubt that Chris would get him even more over. Other than that, they knew John Moxley is gonna be a draw, so they put their top belt on him, and guess what? People love him. They're beating NXT's ratings pretty regularly now. I think this all boils down to preferences. I like AEW more because I just felt really bored with WWE programming. And if you still like WWE, then more power to you. I'm not saying that everyone has to watch AEW now. I'm just saying, if you get bored with WWE, there are a lot of other alternatives. And AEW, in my opinion, is the best of the bunch right now. Or, better yet, if you feel like you're bored with wrestling in general, if you've lost interest in any wrestling, then just stop watching. Take a break. Go outside. No, wait, don't do that. Stay inside. Wrestling's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. I mean, I hope.